Welcome to Healthy Births, Happy Babies, where we share tips, tools, and stories grounded in natural childbirth and parenting principles, so that instead of feeling overwhelmed and confused during this exciting time in your life, you feel safe, supported, and empowered in your childbirth and parenting journey. And now, here's your host, Dr. Jay Warren.
Hello, and welcome back to another episode of Healthy Births, Happy Babies. I'm Dr. Jay Warren. I'm the Family Wellness Chiropractor and the Wellness Care Coordinator here at the CAP Wellness Center. And on today's episode, we have Kimberly Johnson back with us. If you're a regular listener to the podcast, you know her well. She's been on a number of times talking about prenatal care, talking about pelvic floor health, about postpartum care for women. And today, though, we're going to be doing something a little different. Kimberly and I have had a conversation about sex after children, but that was mainly geared towards the women listeners. Today, we're going to have a conversation about intimacy after children, but this is going to be geared towards the dads. This is something that is on the question of everyone's mind. It can be a sensitive subject, but today she's really going to be talking about her experience working with women and sharing what women really are looking for and the challenges they're having after they've had babies as far as getting back into having a sex life, but also her experience in working with dads who are new parents and having challenges with creating intimacy again now that the baby is here. So I think it's an important topic. I think it's going to be a really valuable discussion. But before we get into that, I want to take a moment to pause from a message from our sponsor, the CAP Wellness Center. Hi, it's Dr. Jay, and one of the things I love about working at the CAP Wellness Center is being able to play a role in bringing a baby into the world that much more safely, much more naturally, and much more healthy. You know, it's something that is an amazing gift to give a child, to have them start off their life healthy without the stress and the trauma that can all too often be a part of the birth experience. So I consider it an honor to work with pregnant women to help them with that time during their pregnancy. And it is a privilege to be able to work with infants and help correct any distortions that might have happened through the birth process and allow them to start off their life healthy in alignment and in balance so that a health challenge doesn't hold them back from being all that they can be in this world. All right, now let me introduce to you once again Kimberly Johnson. Kimberly is a certified sexological bodyworker and a certified somatic experiencing practitioner. She's also a single mom, doula, Rolfer, and yoga teacher. She leads workshops internationally and virtually on the intersection of women's sexuality and spirituality, as well as holistic postpartum healing. After living in Brazil for 8 years, she now resides in San Diego, California, where she has a private practice specializing in birth injury, birth trauma, and sexual healing. And now let me turn over to my conversation with Kimberly Johnson. Hello, Kimberly. Welcome back.
Hi, Jay.
How are you doing today?
I'm great. How are you doing?
I'm doing very well as well. And here you are again. It's fantastic to have you back. And we're going to be doing something different today, right? We're going to be talking about dads. The previous episodes.
Yeah, I'm really excited about this.
Yeah, I think it's really necessary. And I'm glad that we can have this time today to kind of devote some time to dads and about talking about issues of intimacy after children. And I know it's something that kind of isn't spoken about as much as it needs to be, and I know you feel really passionately about that too, so I'm happy to be able to provide a space, and hopefully this sparks a conversation and it continues ones for moms and dads, but then also couples that we're working with.
Definitely, yeah.
Because I know with all the work that you do, a large of a part of it is obviously working with women, as the same work that I do here prenatally and postpartum, but the dads really are, needing support as well. So in the conversations you're having with women or just seeing the dynamics of the work you're doing with the women, what's tending to come up for the dads out there?
Well, like you said, I think that, of course, there's growing awareness about the changes that women go through postpartum and growing awareness about the support that women need. But a lot of the times there's not as much awareness about what dads need, and not only what they need, but how we can help dads understand what moms need at postpartum. Because, there's just this postpartum window that I talk about over and over again. But when things go well during that window, it just sets up the whole rest of the relationship, the rest of the child rearing in a really great way. Or there can just be patterns and habits that get established that are more difficult to shift later on. So a lot of what I see in my office is women who are feeling disconnected from themselves, either feeling actually just injured, like there's just something that's hurting them when they're having sex, or they're experiencing incontinence, or just overall they just don't feel like themselves, and they're not really quite sure how to get back to their sexual identity or their identity as a woman that's separate from being a mom. And what's made me really passionate about this is that most women who come, they're not telling the story that I think the bigger cultural script tells us, which is that, men want sex all the time, and men are, sorry, it's an airplane, badgering women for it. And what I really hear in my office is that women are praising their partners and saying, my husband's a saint. He's super patient, but I'm worried because I don't know how long, sorry about that, so loud. I don't know how long he's going to be patient for. And really just an overall kind of confusion about how do we come back together again? How do we approach each other again in a way that feels good for both of us? And so I just want to, the other thing that I hear a lot is women who are calling me and they ask me what my prices are and they tell me what they're needing, and then their instant response to that is, I need to get my husband's permission for this. And then oftentimes they say, well, my husband wasn't on board. So I want to create a connection for dads to understand what a profound shift it is postpartum, that women aren't being lazy. Yes, women have been bearing children for, whatever, tens of thousands of years, but not as much was demanded of our nervous systems in the past. Birth was never as difficult as it is for women now. And so rather than seeing it as, a lot of men are very surprised at the vulnerability because they're used to their spouse being full on, totally capable, taking care of everything. And then all of a sudden they're seeing this person that they love so much vulnerable, and they're perceiving it as being hurt rather than just a normal recovery time. And that can be also very confusing about where they fit in the dynamic.
And what time frame are you talking about that women are having these kind of concerns? Is it right after the birth, or does it usually take a couple months for that to show up?
It's different for every person. I mean, if the birth scenario, like recently I saw someone in my office and their birth scenario it went way differently than they had planned for. And the mom's reaction is that she's devastated and she's really emotional and upset and feels physically kind of damaged. And the dad's reaction is basically like, you should get over this. It's over and done with now. The baby's fine. You're fine. And I would say that both of those are actually trauma responses. So one of those responses is that this woman physically lived the experience in her body, and her body is a reminder every single day that the birth didn't go how she thought it should go and how she thought it would be good for her baby. I think that her husband feels as if he didn't do a good job as a protector, and he also is confused about why he is feeling so many different things. And so he just wants to shut it down and not talk about it and move forward because, our culture also tells us, like, if the woman's alive and the baby's alive, then it's all good however it went. So I think the concerns can come up over a long period of time. I don't think anyone's expecting to have a lot of penetrative sex before the 6-week visit. But what I hear from women is that the men are waiting for the 6-week visit to get the kind of green light the women are too, but the women come out of that visit just as confused as they did going in. Like, okay, now I'm allowed to have sex, but what does that mean? How do I approach that? What do I want? What does my husband want? It doesn't feel like I don't feel like the same person. We don't feel like the same couple anymore.
And so how would a man help navigate those areas? Is it something that is best providing space for the woman to figure it out herself, or
no,
what kind of dialoguing tools can you share?
Yeah, I think that's like, if there's one thing that men get out of this podcast, is that it's okay to own your own desire, and it's okay to take a stand for it. So rather than giving space, it's like expanding the definition of sex. So expanding it beyond penis and vagina penetration into like the whole world of intimacy and connection. And if you took ejaculation or climax off the table, what would sex be like? And then it's really asking open-ended questions, because most of the women in my office, it's not that they don't want sex, it's that they don't want the sex they're being offered or the sex they used to have. But because this subject isn't openly talked about, people don't really know where to start. So one starting place is just changing this mindset. Like, what would it be like if ejaculation wasn't the point of this interaction that I want to have? And what if I think about sex as the way that I look at my partner, the way that I talk to my partner, the notes that I write to my partner? The research shows, the Gottman research on relationship, that men actually aren't necessarily missing sex postpartum for the first 3 to 6 months. What they're missing is loving attention. They're missing affection. They're missing, all eyes are turned toward the baby, and they're missing that dyadic connection with their partner. So one thing is just to take a stand for like check-ins and closeness. So even if it's 5 minutes a day, a baby can cry for 5 minutes. There's definitely 5 minutes that can be taken just to make eye contact, to breathe together, to ask for something that you want that doesn't include genital touch, and really making those requests, because I find that men really don't like being rejected. It's a huge fear, and it's a kind of an ingrained cultural message too, that like men want it all the time and women don't want it, and so men get put in this position of being an aggressor and a pursuer, and they really don't want to be rejected. But it's like taking that sting out of rejection and starting to ask some open questions about, I really want to touch and connect with you right now. What kind of touch would feel good to you? Or I really need to receive touch right now, and if you could scratch my back and pay attention as you're doing it, that would feel really good. And just starting with very simple requests for nonverbal contact. A lot of women also say they're not really feeling sexual because they're feeling like they barely even have time to talk to their partner. So, especially me being a single parent, I know it's not realistic. Everyone's like talks about date nights and you got to have your date night, but that's not a reality for some people. There's just not childcare available, or a lot of people are working in the day and they want to be with their kid at the end of the day. They don't want to leave the child. But, over the trajectory of parenting, there comes a time when people are putting the child in the middle of their connection to avoid the connection. And it's on both people to be shepherding the relationship. And I guess I think before children, men are used to women taking care of the relationship mostly, taking care of this like middle space in the entity with a lot of care. And I think postpartum is a chance for men to step in and start caring for the relationship and helping. I had a client who has a baby who's 15 months old, and she came to me for some prolapse issues, and her homework between sessions was to leave her baby with her neighbor who she trusts and go around the block for 5 minutes, because her baby's never been left with anyone except for her and her husband since the baby's been born. And she got asked to go out to dinner with her husband, and it was like a 2-hour dinner, and the people said, well, get a sitter. And she just thought, that's like impossible. Like there's no possible way I can even do that. So it's like a baby step of okay, if your child's sleeping in your bed with you, or you feel like it's impossible to separate, making small space so that there is actually space for the partnership.
And that goes back to, I think you talked about in a previous podcast, the 5-minute game, kind of what you were talking about with asking for requests, that, kind of taking penetration sex off the table and building intimacy that way, and asking for things that, if a guy is afraid of getting rejected, that are kind of easy yeses to be given.
Yes. So, taking the time to really, I think in our culture, there's this big separation between talking, touch, and sexual touch or sexual closeness. And how can those start to be bridged more? And, but women need to be called to the table, because if the reason that a person is avoiding interaction is because they're in pain or they have an injury, they need to go and get help for that injury. And men need to support them in understanding, because what happens is postpartum women are so, there's just so much going on. There's so much reconfiguration happening in every level of our being that we can't even parse out what is because of what. Like, okay, I don't want to have sex, but all women just say, well, I have low libido. But sometimes it's they have birth trauma. Sometimes it's that they have an injury. Sometimes it's that there's some pattern that happened in the birth with their partner that drove them away. Sometimes it's lingering rejection. Sometimes, there's all kinds of things that can come to the surface, but they all are kind of mixed together in the blur of breastfeeding and, getting back to work and all of the demands of new parenting that are real. But the thing is there's a bit of urgency here, because couples who don't stay together, a very high percentage of them identify the place at which their relationship started to fragment was after they had kids. And it doesn't have to be like that when there's focused attention on the relationship rather than just sort of a letting go of each other to focus on the child. And it behooves the child, because the more intimacy and closeness there is with the parents, the better the relationship is, the more stable the family is.
Right, and then the child grows up in a household like seeing what a good model of intimacy and closeness, I should say, rather than, not sexual intimacy, but just that intimacy between parents and showing what love in a couple is, rather than there being distance.
Right. And, and kids sense that, right? So they know what's going on. And, some men relate to kind of going back to being teenagers. Women say they feel like they're virgins again after they have babies. And that's not because there's some people are saying that because of tightness or like physical discomfort. But a lot of people are saying that of like they're completely rediscovering their sexuality. And if you were going to rediscover sexuality with someone, which is actually what an amazing gift, right? Like we're also indoctrinated to believe that men and our biology drives us towards variety. So what an amazing thing to have the same partner and be able to rediscover them in a new body, in a new way. I mean, it is a total possibility for rebirth. It's just that it's a time that has so many demands that fully mining that is challenging, but it's worth it. And if men cannot buy into this mentality that they're taking by asking, I have another client who told me that he didn't want to initiate. His wife wanted more sex, but he didn't want to initiate it because at the end of the day, because she was tired, he thought she was tired, or poor her because she worked so hard, or all these things, even though she was saying that she did want it. So, women, as we talked about before, is like need to step up into a place that sex isn't a demand or some kind of gift they're giving away, but it's an offering to them and something that's genuinely nourishing. And I mean, imagine if the sexual relationship could be something that actually energizes both people and, contribute, instead of making them more tired at the end of the day, contributes to making them feel more alive. And of course, that takes some creativity with timing and creativity with, like I said, the types of touch. But it also flies in the face of sort of dopamine sex and how we're driven to believe sex is supposed to be with everything of like multiple orgasms and, just so much attention towards like this booming sex life. So that's why it's really necessary to open the idea of what sex is, so that you're not thinking, oh, well, I need to have like an hour-long session every single day. It's like, no, 5 minutes of kissing, 5 minutes of contact, 5 minutes of breathing together, 5 minutes of spooning without the kids in between, ways that you can create closeness that becomes the underlying kind of power source of the relationship. And it's absolutely within a man's right and almost responsibility to stand up for his desire for that.
And even like taking off because I know that most dads that I speak to here postpartum, like they're always talking about like, well, I know I need to get like date night back on the table. And it's always about like all of that orchestration of a date night. Whereas what you're saying, like with just even like the 5 minutes at a time is even before date night. One, practically speaking, it's a lot easier, but it's actually going to build a new create a new relationship in the context of all the newness of parenthood, rather than just going back to like, well, this is what we did before we, had kids. So why doesn't she like it now? Or why don't I like it now? Because he's transforming as well.
Definitely. And it's like any practice, right? If you're going to play the violin, like, is it better to play for 2 hours once every 2 weeks, or is it better to sit down and listen to some music and close your eyes and really feel it and, hold your instrument 5 minutes a day? It's better to do it, any kind of a practice, whether that's sports, is it better to run for 2 hours once every 2 weeks, or is it better to walk every day? Any kind of coach or teacher would tell you that it's that daily practice that is the fuel. And, we tend to think, 5 minutes or this or that, but it's actually, I'm all for date night. I mean, I think that ideally people would have like a 3 or 4 hour window once a week together. Couples would have that just to explore their erotic connection. But in the postpartum period, when that's not possible for everyone, although I would say that, building towards that is a great goal, that having to have it be date night and, this lead up towards something as if it's so separate from the rest of our life, right? Like, so yeah, I think it's really important to create those periodic check-ins every day.
Yeah. And I think like in our last closing minutes here, what do you think is the biggest take home for the dads, or a couple of, quick tips beyond the ones that we just talked about that dads could implement now to, start creating that new relationship?
I think that in a non-charged time, so probably in a time when like both people are clothed and feeling well rested and there's a little bit of privacy, having a conversation, just stating that, like, I've noticed there's a lot of distance and I'm feeling a craving for you and I really want to connect and I'm not sure where to start. And where are you with this?
Okay. And really start a conversation.
Yeah. Start the conversation, because usually if you start a touch conversation, then that can, it depends on the kind of relationship people have, but that can, opening a conversation is different than being touch rejected, I think. So, and then I don't think, if whatever resistance it's met with, if it is met with resistance, it's okay to come back to that, to say like, this is really important to me and I'm not willing to keep going without addressing it. Not like I'm leaving the relationship, but I'm just,
of course not. Right.
Like it's very important to me. And I think women actually want that. I mean, because you're not pressuring someone. You're just simply stating that it's important to you and that it's important enough to you to get help or to get, attention. And then maybe ask some questions like, do you understand what's different, or is there support that you need? Would you like to go see a physical therapist? Do you feel like there's physical resistance? Or if it's a fatigue question, do you feel like you need some, like, do you feel like we should wake up early to connect, or like offering solutions to ways that it's possible to connect?
Very good. Well, thank you for that. I know, like, with the majority of the information and the work that's on your website, it tends to be on the women's side of things, but I think it's important for our listeners to understand that you do work with men and really can help further this conversation, whether it's like with them particularly or possibly being able to work with their mates that might be having these kind of challenges. I'll make sure that your website information, of course, is up in the show notes and on the website as well. Kimberly, thank you again for being here today.
Thank you so much, Jay. I always love talking to you.
Thank you for joining us today. For more information about this episode and other natural childbirth and parenting topics, please visit us at capwellnesscenter.com or message us on our Facebook page with any questions you might have. We here at the Cap Wellness Center look forward to helping you and your family be as happy and healthy as you can be.